Hey everybody, it's Chris Kirkpatrick and Norbert Juiced, and welcome to the Executive Job Search Secrets podcast. And today's episode is going to be really fun, I think. We get a lot of questions from job seekers, candidates about how to get the most out of their relationships with different recruiters, and ultimately, we do a lot of talking about how to find jobs in the hidden market, and ultimately, I believe recruiters are a big time gateway, bridge to find opportunities that you're never going to find anywhere else. And so rather than Norbert and I just giving our opinions today, we decided that it would be best to bring on a recruiter who has been doing this for decades and who's got a plethora of experience, who has tons of success, receives hundreds of emails a week, hundreds of resumes a week from candidates, and is having success month in, week out, helping people find their ideal jobs and getting them placed in great companies all over the country. And so without further ado, we're going to get into this. And we can't wait to interview Jimmy Taylor from jimmytaylorjobs.com.
Hey, everybody. So I want to welcome today our special guest. His name is Jimmy Taylor. And Jimmy is somebody that I've known for over 10 years now and worked alongside of him as a fellow recruiter. Chris and I thought that it would be great to have somebody who, walks the walk every day and talks the talk to speak to you about some of the inner workings, kind of a day in the life of a recruiter, and kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and let you get an inside glimpse into, what their life looks like and how you can leverage that knowledge to make yourself a better candidate for them. And so we chose Jimmy because of a couple things. Number one, he is a very fun personality, which always makes things more entertaining, but he's also a very successful recruiter. Jimmy has been in and around the medical device industry since 1983. Started off as a sales rep, worked his way up into sales management, and now has been recruiting in the medical sales industry for 22 years. He's part of the First Interview Network, which is a very large recruiting network of several hundred recruiters that work cooperatively with one another. And Jimmy has consistently always placed at the top of the leaderboard within First Interview year after year after year. And he is a client-driven recruiter. So just basically there are some recruiters that are more candidate-driven and work with the candidates to place them with the companies. And then there's recruiters who are more company-driven, work with the companies and help them find the candidates. And that's kind of Jimmy's background. He's more of a client-driven recruiter. And like I said, has done it for 22 plus years. He's from Atlanta, Georgia. He's a graduate of the University of Georgia. And he's a big Georgia Bulldog fan. Uh-oh. So we won't hold that against him. He's licking his wounds a little bit this year. The dogs are down a little bit this year.
Yeah, we are. Thank you, Norbert.
That's awesome. Well, Jimmy, so we're so excited to have you on here because I think having somebody with your experience, with your success, with your perspective, I think it's going to bring a lot of value to our audience. And if you don't mind, could you kind of I know Norbert just gave a quick synopsis of your background and stuff, but what is it that you love about what you do? I mean, I know you work with a lot of different candidates and a lot of different clients, and you get connections from candidates all the time, but it's a really, recruiting is a very interesting job because you're having to balance both relationships, right? You have to figure out, and serve the needs of your client who is actually paying your bills, right? Who you're going to get compensated by when you help fill a position. But ultimately also, even though your alliance and allegiance, so to speak, is to the client, you do have to go out and serve candidates as well. So, and I know Norbert's got a ton of questions for you, but I would just love to start off by just kind of hearing from your heart, what do you love about what you do the most?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Norbert, glad to be here. I think with recruiting, for me, I have my own business, I get to choose who I want to work with,
Mm-hmm.
and I get paid at the end of the day if a deal goes down. As you guys had mentioned, I represent, technically I represent the employer because they're paying me the fee, but in reality, I'm a broker. I don't make a penny unless I find quality candidates that my client's going to like and ultimately hire. So at the end of the day, the biggest satisfaction is closing the deal. It never gets old. There's a lot of frustrations in recruiting, as is there any job or any business that we're in, but those frustrations are part of the business. But overall, I would say the most satisfying thing in 22 years is just consistently helping people find employment, helping employers find people, and then getting paid for it. And it's a nice, satisfying business. I feel like I could do this forever. I don't know how long that would be, but certainly it's given me great satisfaction. I really enjoy it.
Awesome. So Jimmy, to kind of start things off, why don't you share a little bit about what a day in the life of a recruiter looks like? Like
Sure.
when you wake up in the morning and you get started at your desk, what does that look like? And again, we're looking at it from the perspective of the candidates. Like, I think candidates are driving in their car on the way to their cases and they just call the recruiter and, they expect the recruiter to pick up the phone or return their phone call. So, we want to help them fully understand, what all the balls you're juggling on a daily basis.
Sure, absolutely. So during normal times, any given week, any given period of time, I'm working on 10 or 12 different jobs with different employers across the country. So the first thing I do in the morning when I get in my office is I download email. I might peek at it the night before, but email is a big part of our business because that's how most candidates prefer to submit their resume. And it's how most employers and recruiters typically prefer to receive the resume. So you can imagine on an average day, if I'm very busy, I can get 100 emails overnight. Can you imagine how long it takes to open 100 emails with attachments? So, I read every email and I open every attachment, every resume to sort that resume, enter it to my database, put it in a folder, make it applicable to the job I'm working on. It's very time consuming. Excuse me, my phone starts ringing typically between about 8:30. So I try to get in the office a little sooner than that and get on top of the email. Then I look at my open job orders and I prioritize everything based on the client need. Who's interviewing the quickest? Who has things on the schedule in terms of interviews and going over resumes? And so I'm constantly monitoring that level of communication because it's extremely important as a recruiter that you meet your client's timeline, your deadline, and make sure you accommodate them as much as you can. So with the candidates, I try to respond to everybody that I can. I do it through email, I'll do it through text, and of course I'll do it through voice. But it's not unusual for me on a busy day to look up and all of a sudden it's 11 a.m., then I look up, it's 3 p.m., then I look up at 6 p.m. I try to put in a good 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. day, but it never ends because emails come in all hours of the night and I'll peek at them on my phone when I have to. But that's typically, and then of course, if, I've got interviews ongoing, I'm prepping candidates for interviews, I'm giving feedback to the hiring manager, I'm making sure I do everything administratively that I'm responsible for the client. I'll take cold calls when I can. Sometimes I get overwhelmed and I can't take a cold call, and some candidates will get frustrated with that. But I will return typically every phone call as long as I have a resume. It's really hard to talk to a new candidate without a resume. It's like talking to somebody and being blind. And that's really hard for candidates to understand. They think it's a privacy issue. Some of them don't think it's necessary. But the best advice I can give on getting your resume and getting a phone call with recruiters to make sure you have that resume submitted first, because it really helps me to look at somebody's background as I'm evaluating and talking to them about different opportunities.
Excellent. So one of the things that we talked about is that, your allegiance really is to your client, although you more eloquently put that you're a broker because you are responsible for the candidate as well. But, what would be something that you would tell the candidates that you work with, maybe a little tip or tidbit that could help you make placing them more easy or help you with your client? What's some little tip or trick, that you see from the candidates that is a problem for you, or, maybe an annoyance, something like that, if they knew this, that it might make your job a little easier and their search a little more successful?
Absolutely, Norbert. Without question, the number one frustration I have is candidate resumes. It sometimes is beyond belief that candidates don't put the time and effort into a quality resume. Mm. I have an old saying that I've told candidates for years: companies don't hire paper, they hire people. But if you don't look good on paper, you're not going to get contacted. Especially to today's world where there's so many algorithms and computer systems with companies and recruiters that are looking for keywords, the things that can kick out a resume. I try to tell candidates, look, there's no perfect resume, okay? But you've got to put it in a format like MS Word or a PDF file. Use spell check, use grammar check. Don't put borders in your resume. They're hard to import to a database. Just basic things. I can't tell you the number of candidates that reach out to me and ask me to help them with their resume. I'm not a resume writer. Don't want to be. Not my cup of tea. There are companies out there like the Career Accelerator Club that will do that for you. There's 1,000 places on the internet, but if you really want a good deal, and have somebody help you with things like that, Career Accelerator Club would be a good spot to start. But the resume, without question, Norbert, is the most frustrating thing, because I think just some candidates are not sure how to do it or how to make it look acceptable. And here's another thing about a resume that just drives me absolutely bananas. Candidates do not put their physical address on there anymore. I understand security issues. I get that. But at the very minimum, put your city, state, and zip code. So many employers, especially the large Fortune 500 companies, it's not unusual for them to have 2 or 3 territories in a city like Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, New York. And if they can't determine where you live by your resume, you're going to get kicked out. In fact, if I have identified a candidate that I think is very viable, I'll get them to add the street address to validate where they live, because it's a big part of employers saying, you don't live in the right spot. Oh, yes, you live in a perfect spot. But I get the security thing. So at the very minimum, I ask candidates to at least put the city, state, and zip code.
Good advice. I know the one thing that I experienced when recruiting was a lot of candidates are open to multiple cities, right? So like in the Midwest and Southwest, people are like, when I recruited in Des Moines, Iowa, for example, they would purposely not put their address on there because they'd say, I'm open to move to either Dallas, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, or whatever. But, to your point, a lot of managers can see through that. They can smell through that. And from my experience, they're kind of like, this person's, really just kicking tires. They're not really looking to move to Denver for a specific reason. They're willing to go where the job is. And in their mind, I think a lot of candidates think that's a positive thing. But, from my experience, a lot of hiring managers actually see that as a negative. What's been your experience with that?
No question about it. And my advice that I try to give candidates is put your current residence on your resume. Then if you want to, below it, in parentheses, open to relocation. That's all you need to do. Mm-hmm. Because you've got to get contacted. And honesty is the best thing. Nobody's going to be fooled by where you think you might want to go and where you currently live. Everybody can use Google Maps and everything else and look at your rest of your resume, look at your territory and that sort of thing. You're going to get much better response from recruiters if you put your current address on there. And if you're open to relocation, put that in your cover letter, put it under the city and state on your resume. You're open to relocation. Your cover letter can list the cities you want to go to, but you absolutely need to be upfront about where you live on the resume.
Yeah, I actually ironically had a client reach out to me in the last few weeks, and they were looking to move to Phoenix. And just as an example of why managers are so suspicious and concerned about somebody who doesn't physically live in that city, is they invest a lot of time, effort, energy, money into interviewing those people, potentially flying them into the city where they're at or whatnot. But this particular client just sent me a message saying, I've decided I met a girl and I'm not moving now after all. And so, I mean, how often has that happened in your 22 years of recruiting where you've seen candidates who are kicking tires and then decide, oh, I'm not moving after all?
Relocation is such a challenge. It's very tricky. It's very hard to accomplish. I tell candidates often, it's not impossible, but it's going to be very challenging to try to get it done. Most employers want somebody that's local and knows the lay of the land, has the contacts or credential, and they're ready to go. And if you're going to reload, you better advertise yourself that it's going to be an easy reload. No home to sell, no kids to take out of school. You're going to be at your new residence in 6 weeks, something of that nature, because it's going to be really hard to convince a hiring manager. Even if you're as good as some of the local candidates, they're going to always have a tendency to lean towards the local people.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the things that, we had asked you in advance was that with candidates, we told you that we'd like your input on what are some of the top reasons that you've seen that candidates haven't gotten jobs. Some of the, obviously there's a multitude of reasons, but what would you say are the top 5 reasons that a candidate maybe hasn't landed a position due to things that maybe they could fix?
Well, we'll discuss for this topic, we'll discuss the negative reasons why they didn't get it rather than the positive. Positive reasons are they just got beat by a better candidate, but the negative reasons may be a lack of follow-up, appropriate follow-up. What is that today? Is it email? Is it text? Is it a handwritten note left at the hotel? Is it an overnight letter from FedEx? I had a candidate tell me 3 or 4 months ago, I know this is old school, but I called HR and got the manager's home address and I FedExed a letter, thank you letter. He said, there's still something about that purple and orange truck pulling up with the hat on, a guy coming up delivering a letter to the manager. And you know what? It made an impact. It really did. So I would say probably lack of follow-up or quality follow-up. I would also say that maybe candidates get beat out because they don't do enough homework on the employer. They don't do their due diligence like they should. With the internet, there's no excuse. Even if it's a private company, you can, outside of financials, you can still find out a lot of information about a company. You can talk to customers. You can talk to people in the business. You can talk to physicians. There's a lot of ways you can get your due diligence. I tell candidates, think about the days you were single and somebody wanted to set you up on a blind date. You know darn well you stalked them on the internet to find out all about them before you met with them. Why would you not do that with an employer? And they go, yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I should do that. So being prepared and coming in and knowing about the company, I think that's another thing, Norbert, that these candidates sometimes just lose a little bit of sight of. They just didn't do enough homework. I think the other reason, third or fourth reason, is they probably don't come across very sincere and very genuine in the close. As recruiters, we always tell candidates, make sure you close them. Well, I think for most of my clients, it's not how hard you close, it's how good you're at it. Because if you come across overzealous, you look desperate. Right. If you come across passive, you look like you're kicking tires. And I tell candidates, if this is a job, if this interview, this final interview, if this validates for you that you want this job, that's the time that you let the hiring manager know. And one of the techniques that I try to share with candidates is use the presumptive close. In other words, I know you got a lot of great candidates. I know you're down to a couple quality candidates. I just want to let you know that I've made up my mind. If you do decide to extend me an offer, I will accept. That way you're not coming across cocky or presumptuous or anything. You're just saying your mind's made up. Because I can't tell you the number of times over the years a manager will call me and go, yeah, Jimmy, I'm down to 2 candidates. They're both good. I got an A- and an A+, and I could hire either one of them. And I think I'm going to go with the candidate that seems to want a little more. And that's what usually happens.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the time, but it does happen. So off the top of my head, Norbert, those would be the main things. There's a lot of other maybe little things. They didn't have good body language. They weren't well groomed. They didn't, they were a little maybe late to the interview, or, it could be a number of little things. I've seen it all, but those are the main things I would think that candidates need to be aware of.
I love that, Jimmy. It's those are all things that any single person can control, right? With a little intention in the process. And I'm a huge believer authenticity has to be there first of all, right? Like, I mean, and you said it earlier, is people don't hire paper. I always say people never, people don't hire resumes, they hire people, because the first thing that a hiring manager is going to think about for the most part is, do they like you, right? Like, can they see themselves working with you, beside you, managing you, like whatever the dynamic of that relationship is, depending on the company and the position. But it really has to come down to that. I mean, obviously the fact that you are amazing at what you do, the fact that you're proficient in your skills, and you maybe if you're a device rep and you have the territory down, you have the relationships, all that stuff, like that's all great. But at the same time, it's like, how much did you stand out in your ability to show that you have done the research ahead of time on the company? You understand where they want to go, what their needs are, what you need to come in and hit the ground running fast. And like all that stuff seems a little bit, I don't know, in the clouds or kind of vague to a lot of candidates because they don't know what to do. But the reality is, you said it awesomely, is with the internet these days, with technology, with doing a little phone call, like you can make phone calls to the receptionist at a company and get all the marketing materials, have all that stuff sent to you, do your preparation. Heck, if you live in the area with the stop down, and maybe a little more challenging with COVID right now, but you can get this kind of information readily accessible in your fingertips. Do your research. It's kind of why I always tell people, like, never take an interview without at least 72 hours notice, because you need to make sure you like literally dedicate dozens of hours to preparing for any kind of job that you're excited
Exactly.
about. And so no, I think that's amazing.
Great.
So
Norbert, what else did I know we were talking about some other stuff as well.
Well, so the one thing, Jimmy, that you had mentioned that, you do a little preparation for your candidates. Are there certain bullet points that for every single candidate you'll kind of go through to help prepare them for their interview? Do you have kind of a close that you tell them, do you have this close down and use some version of this close? Are there certain steps that you will go through for each and every candidate?
Yes, there certainly is, Norbert. One thing I take a lot of pride in is I try to prep every candidate the same way. And I tell my clients that way nobody feels like I'm favoring one candidate over the other. I learned early on in recruiting that the candidates I recruit and submit, it's not necessarily what I think, because they're not coming to work for JT and Associates. They're going to work for my client. So I try to understand my manager's personality, what he or she is looking for. Mm-hmm. So what I'll do with the candidate, I always tell candidates, once I've recruited them, submitted their resume, scheduled an interview, is to call me the day before the interview. That's the day that I want to prep every candidate. Some candidates go, well, why can't we talk now? I might be because what I tell you today, you might forget the day before the interview. If I tell you the day before the interview, there's a better chance it's going to be fresh on your mind and you're going to be ready to go. And I spent a lot of time on the hiring manager's personality, their approach, their style, what to expect. I'll give them some general questions that may be asked, but I don't have privy to the questions that every manager is going to ask from every employer. And it's probably a good thing because they mix them up anyway. because they know I might tell them. So they're going to mix it up. I tell every candidate to be prepared for situational questions, how you'd handle certain scenarios. They're going to try to find out how you approach a sale, how your company measures success. They're going to ask you how you organize your territory. They're going to ask you about personal attributes, what motivates you, what drives you, that sort of thing. And I try to give, I'll ask a lot from candidates. Well, what type of questions should I ask the hiring manager? And I always suggest to candidates, ask anything you want as it relates to the job, the hiring process, the training, the market conditions, expectations in the territory, biggest challenges in the territory, company culture, ask about leadership, ask anything you want strategic. The manager will be impressed. Let them know what you discovered on the internet about the company. Get them to validate what you think you've learned about them. Now, every candidate will take that and go out and execute it a little bit differently. And a lot of times it's the candidate that does that the best that comes across the best. But you get right down to it. You prep every candidate the same way. At the end of the day, it's who has the most synergy with the hiring manager. Yeah. Can I work with this guy or gal? Can I work with this manager? Do we have a lot of common ground? Do we feel like we got a partnership here? That's what happens at the end of the day.
Okay. The interesting thing is I always felt like there was a kind of a kiss of death comment from a candidate when they would call me and they would be like, Norbert, just get me the interview. If you get me the interview, I will get the job. Kind of that supercar salesman type mentality, no offense to the car salespeople of the world, but, I didn't know if you have any of those type of, I want to say it was like 100% of the time. Anytime anybody ever said to me, I will get this job, just get me the interview, just get me in front of them, it was a kiss of death. Like, never, ever did that candidate get. So I don't know if the other thing I was going to say too is that follow up, after you do all that prep and so forth, so many candidates, you would tell them, listen, do me a favor, contact me afterwards. Let me know how it went. And it could have been the most tenured, 20 President's Club type reps. Sometimes they actually did worse follow-up because they just thought that their stature and their accolades were going to get them that job. But so I didn't know if you had any kind of
Norbert, you bring up a good point about follow-up after the interview. I'd encourage every candidate to call me after the interview to download that. It's fresh on your mind. Let's talk about it. What are you feeling? What's positive about the job? What do you have any concerns? Any red flags? To your point about some candidates don't follow up as well. I used to hold that as a negative until probably 4 or 5 years ago. I started to understand every candidate gets attached to the same job you're recruiting for differently. Some candidates are all over it when you call them and recruit them. Some need to do a little due diligence. Some need to go on a couple interviews. That's because everybody processes the opportunity differently, especially between male and female, because there's different things about the job that are different to different types of backgrounds. And so I don't penalize candidates as much anymore. Sometimes I'll send an email. Sometimes they just need a day or two to think about it, maybe talk it over with their family. If I don't hear from them in 24 hours, then I've got.
Nope. Norbert, can you hear him? Are you there?
Yeah. Did we just freeze up?
He froze up. He'll be back in a second, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll wait for him to come back and then we can.
Problem with that. Am I still here?
You
Norbert?
were not here. You actually froze up. So it's no big deal.
Okay.
We can go back. We can edit some of that out. That's okay. I don't know if you want to kind of recap what you just said a little bit though.
Yeah, Norbert had asked about candidate follow-up and how important that was in the process. And it used to be a few years ago, I would penalize candidates for not calling me right away, because I instruct everybody to call right away so they can share what they feel about the opportunity, the pros and the cons. But I have found over the years, some candidates who process and evaluate the opportunity differently need a little more time. They need to maybe go home and sleep on it. They may need to talk it over with a family. They may just need a chance to let it marinate. So I give everybody 24 hours to get back to me, but I do make note of people that do call right away. But I don't downplay that not following up right away as much as I used to, because I do know that, and I recognize everybody, needs time to evaluate at different stages.
For sure. As long as they're following up with the hiring manager right afterwards, right? That's
more important
right.
than following up with me.
Yeah. That's the one point that there is no grace. I've had multiple times when a manager's called me and said, hey, I love this candidate, but it's been 48 hours and I haven't heard from him. So I'm going to move forward with the other candidate that followed up,
One of the things you said, Jimmy, with all the things you've said, one of the, I guess, lines that I use a lot is that people make decisions emotionally and they validate those decisions with logic. I don't care if you're looking to go buy a car, you're gonna find plenty of emotional reasons why you want that car, and then you're gonna sell your wife or your husband on the logic behind why this decision makes sense, right? Like I do it all the time with my wife with things like that. Why I needed my Jeep, right? It was a total emotional decision, but I had plenty of logical facts why I needed my Jeep. And it's the same thing when you're getting a job. Like that hiring manager has to emotionally buy into you. They have to like you. They have to remember you. There has to be something that separates you from everybody else. I think relying on the logical part of your resume, right? Like the reality is most candidates are going to be competing against other people for the job that have very similar backgrounds, right? Maybe multiple presidents clubs, very similar success metrics that they each have. And so it's not a matter of like, and I feel like Norbert, one of the things you said too is like, you get these guys that are like, just get me the interview and I'll knock it out of the park. It's like, okay, you think that, but you don't even know who you're going up against. So that kind of arrogant statement is just, it's setting yourself up for trouble. And that it's kind of like a lackadaisical statement as well, because it's just like, if you're that arrogant, that tells me you're not going to do the preparation that you need to do to actually win the interview, right? And from that perspective, like if you are competing, let's say there's 4 other people and there's 5 of you going for a job, and you all have a very similar background, similar successes, similar presidents clubs, and you're in the same territory and you have the same relationships, or at least similar, and you have that all kind of like going for each other, then it all comes down to, okay, if I have all these people, and usually I guess it probably wouldn't come down to 5, but let's say it's 1 or 2 other people, right? Like what's going to be the differentiator? It's going to be, do they like you more than the other person? Can they see themselves working with you alongside you day in, day out more than the other person? And the things that you touched on that I love are like the high touch kind of stuff of sending a FedEx, like personal touch letter. I think Pete actually wrote about that in the book a little bit. It's like all the different ways to contact hiring managers, decision makers, and how to follow up, because everybody's got their own thing, right? Like you don't know how that person wants to be communicated with. So you better kind of follow up in multiple different ways and follow up in ways that are unique that other people are less likely to do. Why? Because that's memorable. And anytime you do something that's memorable and different, that's going to make an emotional connection with somebody, whether they realize it or not. It's going to touch them.
Absolutely.
So I love it. I think that's fantastic.
Great.
So Jimmy, if any other tidbits that you would add to this, that any little nuggets that you would want to share with a candidate to help them become a better person for you to place?
Absolutely, Norbert. I think candidates today need to be very mindful of their LinkedIn presence and their LinkedIn profile. If you're not maximizing a free tool, which basically it's free to majority of the users, you are really missing out on a invaluable way to market yourself. You can get professional help. You can get somebody that's skilled at it to help you with it. But just having a basic updated photo, make sure your resume matches what you put on LinkedIn. Can't tell you the number of times a manager's called me and said the resume that I sent did not match what the candidate put on their LinkedIn profile. So now before I submit the resume, I go and look at LinkedIn and make sure they matched up. That's just being careless. And that's a real easy fix. So LinkedIn is a great tool to get yourself out there to recruiters, employers, whoever it might be, because everybody uses LinkedIn today. And they use it for verification. They use it for just to dig on somebody. They use it to validate what they see on a resume. So that's the main thing with other than a resume. Just make sure your LinkedIn is up to date, modern, crisp, easy to read, concise, and easy to get to. And I also recommend to candidates that you probably should put your LinkedIn profile or your LinkedIn link on your resume as part of your contact info, along with your email and your phone.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've been doing for all of the resumes that we do, is actually take the QR code that they do with LinkedIn. They provide a QR code, and we put it in the top corner of the resume as well, to make it so anybody that gets that resume, if they want to see your LinkedIn profile, all they have to do is open their picture and scan it, and it'll open the LinkedIn app on the phone and bring them right to your profile.
Great. One other thing I would mention too is I think candidates need to understand, I'd love to place everybody that called me, everybody that emailed me, everybody that reached out to me on LinkedIn. I would be sitting on my yacht right now in the Caribbean drinking Dom Perignon if I could do that. And I can't do it. I don't have enough jobs for the number of people, but I would tell candidates, be patient, do your part, make sure you look good on paper, stay in touch with me. And, I tell candidates, timing is everything. You may have a great background and a great resume, but if I don't have anything for you, I'll look at my partners on first interview, but I will contact you the minute I have something. I don't mind you calling, texting, or emailing to stay in touch. But that's something else I think is real important, needs to be said.
Let me ask you a question to that, just kind of extend on that, Jimmy, is when you get a candidate that reaches out and you're not able to help them, I think a lot of candidates are very myopic in their thinking when it comes to their job search. It's very reactive in nature, right? And they're just thinking about, how do I get a job right now? And they're trying to leverage you as the recruiter just to solve their need. And so I get it. It's a very selfish kind of angle. I would honestly, I do coach people that's a very poor angle to take. But with that said, what would you say to somebody who, how would you suggest somebody pivot from having that kind of myopic, selfish, self perspective of I just want to use Jimmy to get a job? How could they pivot that to say, maybe, how can I develop a relationship with Jimmy? How can I add value to Jimmy and what he's doing for this position, and anything else for this longer term relationship? Because I bet, and you can speak to this more, but I bet my guess would be, for somebody like yourself, you've had candidates reach out to you, or that you've reached out to start a relationship with, and nothing happened. They were a great candidate. It didn't work out for that first perspective or first opportunity. And then maybe 18 months, 24 months, 3 years later, however time frame, my guess is you found another position. You're like, holy cow, so-and-so from 2 years ago would be perfect for this. You reach out to them. So how important is it for the relationship development between you and a candidate?
Absolutely, Chris. I think candidates have a hard time understanding the role of a recruiter. Yeah. And that recruiters essentially are either candidate driven, and there's some recruiters that are very client driven. I'm very client driven, and I say sort of tongue in cheek over the years, I don't find people jobs, I find companies people. But if I happen to find something that I think is a good background for you, again, going back, I'm a broker and I want the deal to happen. I'm gonna help you every way I can to get prepared for this. Sure. But I think a lot of candidates, they just struggle with man, I've got a great background. I'm perfect for this job that you've advertised, or somebody said you had. Why are you not contacting me? Well, it could be any number of things. It's not that I don't think you're a great candidate. You may not live in the right geographic area. You may not have the exact number of years, the minimum number of years that the client has requested. I try to communicate with every candidate that sends me a really good resume to let them know that I may not have anything today, but and you may not hear from me for 3 months. Heck, I may call you Friday with 3 openings. You never know when these employers are going to call. You never know when somebody on my network is going to post a job in Atlanta, which is where I'm based. And if I think it matches your background, I'm going to forward it to you. So the candidate that's myopic and kind of just can't understand why they're not getting contacted more, I encourage them, look, I'm not the only recruiter in town. I'm not the only recruiter in the United States. I'm busy working with other clients across countries and other cities with other jobs. Make sure you reach out to a couple of different recruiters, even somebody in your hometown.
Absolutely.
That's a great lead in actually to the question I was just going to ask you, is at what point do candidates, what's that fine line between diluting their stock and reaching out to 100 recruiters and everybody's got their resume versus only working exclusively with one recruiter? I've gotten those emails, you probably have too, where somebody sends their resume and they don't blind copy the other recruiters on there. And there's a list of like 46 recruiters' email addresses. And you're kind of like, okay, 46 other recruiters have your resume right now. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time with you. But so what's your advice on that?
Well, that doesn't bother me as much as it does some recruiters. The candidates do that. Here's the reality. If a candidate is looking aggressively, they're going to contact as many recruiters as they can. It is much easier to send one email than it is 46 separate emails. I get that. That doesn't bother me. It never has. I know some recruiters, it just drives them crazy, but for me, it's not a big deal because I understand when somebody's looking, they're going to use every source they can. In fact, I try to tell that myopic candidate, Norbert, that just can't understand why I may not have something for him. I'd say, look, I'd love to be the one to place you. But the reality is you need a job. You just got laid off or your company just got acquired. You need to make sure that you market yourself with a lot of recruiters out there. No one recruiter's got every single job. I mean, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know every job coming through Atlanta. I know a lot of them, but not all of them because I'm too busy working on jobs in other cities. So I think the candidates need to take control of it's their career. We're not career counselors. We're not resume writers. We're recruiters. We'll do everything we can to match you up with great opportunities, but you're in control of this. And you need to make sure you market yourself appropriately, including multiple recruiters.
That's great advice. I mean, Chris and I have talked about that and how to best leverage yourself with multiple recruiters. That, recruiters are working coast to coast and timing is everything. And you may not have an opportunity in that particular geography at that particular time. It's no, disgrace or disservice to that candidate. It's just, a matter of timing. So yeah, I find that very insightful. So I've got a couple personal questions for you, Chris. I don't know if you have any other.
That's good, man. Yeah, we're hitting that time. So we're going to have to wrap it up here in a couple minutes, but yeah, ask away.
Okay. So a couple personal questions for you, and I'm going to embellish on the one a little bit. So it was, what's your favorite business book? And, this might be for you personally. It might be something that you recommend for candidates. Maybe it's 2 books. Maybe it's the best book you recommend to candidates to prepare them, for the job world, or maybe it's one that you personally just love and recommend to everybody.
Well, without question, there's a book out there that I read first in the mid-90s, written by Harvey Mackay, called Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. Mm-hmm. That is a great, great book. It talks about how to be competitive in today's world. This was, again, written in the 90s. Harvey Mackay he's an author of many great books. That's the one I remember the most. I'll still reference it every now and then. I had not yet gotten into recruiting, but it's a great book for anybody that just wants to read how to survive in the competitive world we live in right now. He does a great job of breaking industries down and giving you tidbits and whatnot. I think Harvey Mackay is still writing books, but that's the one I remember the most.
That's awesome. I met Harvey Mackay in 2016 at a Brendan Burchard event. I did some personal mentorship with Brendan Burchard, and he spoke at Brendan's event, and I had a backstage pass, and I got to have lunch with him. It was pretty awesome.
Oh, he's a great speaker,
Yeah,
speaker. And it's
he's
been
amazing.
years, and last I heard, he's still doing well, healthy and working. And
Yep, he's still cranking away. It's pretty awesome to watch.
What's interesting is my regional manager at Cynthia Spine, my very first assignment when he hired me was to get that book and read that book. And I actually owned it from my years at Pitney Bowes. It was one of the first books recommended to me, but I dug it out and reread it for my Cynthia Spine manager. So he would agree with you. He loved that book as well.
I think in modern times,
what's
yeah,
that?
I'm sorry. I was going to mention there's another book called Executive Job Search that has been out recently, a few weeks, few months. That's been a very helpful book too. And I think it's good for candidates that may want to look into, how to write their resume a little better, how to maximize LinkedIn profile. But that's only been on the market a few weeks, but I've read that and that's a very helpful book.
Little shameless plug for Chris there. Chris, you're going to show your
Yeah, this is, I got to tell you, like I obviously shamelessly will plug it all day long, but I honestly, like, I don't know how anybody who's going through, actually, let me ask you this, Jimmy, on top of that question is, when candidates come to you, what % of candidates that reach out to you need some work, right? Like, need their resume to be modified a little bit or updated or enhanced, need their LinkedIn profile enhanced, need their picture, need their banner, need their summary, need their resume, LinkedIn congruency enhanced, need to make sure that they have their recommendations and endorsements and like, what % of candidates that reach out to you do you look at and be like, okay, this person needs at least something to improve on?
I would say at least 25%.
Yep.
Most of it is resume help.
Yep.
LinkedIn, I think just about any of us could use a little help on touching it up and getting a little more profound out there. But, I'm still amazed at the number of people don't put a photo on LinkedIn, or maybe they don't put the photo until you connect with them. I know maybe that's an option. They don't put contact info on there. They don't have correct employment dates that match their resume, that sort of thing. But I would say probably 1 out of 4, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big deal. And I mean, that right there is the main reason that we created the Career Accelerator Club, because it's, an affordable way to help kind of solve that need for people, because it's overwhelming. And I think, I think it's important for us to be able to create value and tools for candidates so they can increase their level of effectiveness. It's the help us help you kind of scenario, right? Like, as a candidate, your job is to help the recruiter help you, right? Like, and be that broker. But you as the candidate have to be the product that the broker can kind of sell to their client, right? Like, so that's I think a really important metric to understand, like, as you're going through the job seeking process. So
absolutely.
Right. And I would think one takeaway from this talk with you today has been that, preparedness and taking your job search, seriously is a huge, responsibility of the candidates. And a lot of candidates don't look at it that way. I'm unemployed, or I want a new job, and I'm just going to float out some resumes. And, if they're listening to this and they did not get that from your message today, they're missing something, because it requires a dedicated, disciplined effort to find a job and find a good job. I mean, you can maybe just find any old job, but to find, a career in something that you really need to strive for to get to that next level takes effort, And I think you've hammered that point home quite well.
Great. Glad to do it.
So my last question for you is, we're going to go into the time machine back just a couple of years. And if you had the ability to tell your 25-year-old self something, what advice would you give to yourself as a 25-year-old?
Probably be patient and learn to change with the change. I'm not one that likes a lot of change. I like doing things one way and until it, defies me or hinders me, I'll eventually do it. But I would tell myself at age 25, be patient, stay determined, stay focused, and learn to change with the change. Because there's change coming, always is. Whether it's technology or whatever else, got to change with it.
That is the truth.
That's awesome.
So Jimmy, thank you so much. I just, I think you're the first recruiter that we've ever had as a guest on the podcast. And I think you gave a lot of valuable tidbits to it. So if there's anybody out there that's looking to get a hold of you or maybe, shoot a resume to you because they'd love to create a relationship with you, what is the best process or best way for people to reach out to you? Sure.
They can email me at JT, as in Jimmy Taylor, JT@jimmytaylorjobs.com. That's JIMMYTAYLORJOBS.com. I also have a website, jimmytaylorjobs.com, with all my contact info, including phone number and background on myself and resume tips, that sort of thing. But would love to get the resume if people would like to get it submitted. Look forward to adding it to my database.
Fantastic. I'll put that in the podcast notes below as well, and in the YouTube video notes.
Perfect.
We'll link that up so people could just click on that, make it easy for them, and we'll go from there. Is there anything else you want to say, Jimmy, or are we good?
No, I've enjoyed this. This has been really a lot of fun. I hope I've answered a lot of questions for candidates. I hope they find it helpful. Again, just be patient, hang in there. We want to place you. Every recruiter wants to place every candidate. Not always practical, but if you got a good background, just know that you're going to be marketable and you'll be fine.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. So
thank you.
Yeah. All right, Jimmy. We'll talk to you.
Have a great day. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Jimmy.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.